Become a part of Oro's tribe. It's Oro's time, the best time of the day. Listen carefully, what he has to say. It's Oro's time.
Hello guys, this is Orof and a warm welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to showcase a super strong monk build for challenge dungeons. And what's so good about this build is that it's very all-round, so you can use it in open world farming, in Reforges, in vanguard and lots of other types of content. And in front of us now we can see just a little showcase of the build in action, and here I'm using a lower resonance version, and I have also lowered my secondaries, so here I'm at around 2000 resonance, and you will see that I will out damage everyone in this party, even though they are 3-4 times higher resonance than me. And the key to do this is to look at the details of your build, and I'm often diving a little bit deeper into the mechanics in my videos, and it's not enough to just copy the essences and the set pieces or maybe even the legendary gems. You have to look at every little detail of your build if you want to perform at the top level. So please invest some of your time to watch the entire video, because it will save you a lot of time in game. So with that being said, let's move on and start by taking a look at the set items. I'm using 4 pieces of V2, and the reason for this is because I want beneficial effect duration, of course, but it's also very important to increase my attack speed, because the attack speed will not only increase my damage, it will also increase my movement speed, and I'm gonna explain why in just a little bit. I also use 2 pieces of round ray, and what this does is that it will gradually increase the damage I make with any channeling skill, and I'm using Cyclone Strike here. I'm gonna show you the essences soon, but 2 pieces of seed is very good against the boss. I could also use 4 pieces of seed instead of 4 pieces of V2, but when I gain 30% attack speed, I will also increase the attack speed of my Cyclone Strike. So I prefer to have extra attack speed compared to extra damage, because it will not only increase my damage, it will also increase my movement speed. But of course, if you're going with a pre-made group, maybe you have a teammate that can consistently apply V2 Surge to you, in that case you can use 4 pieces of seed instead. And finally, I also use 2 pieces of WILDFIRE Imperative, and what this does is that it increases the Firestorm buff from 50% to 70%, so it's just a little bit of an extra damage increase, and we will consistently apply this WILDFIRE effect whenever we attack something, and I'm gonna explain how that works very soon. Let's move on and take a look at the essences, and in the helmet slot I use Inner Flame. And what Inner Flame does is that whenever you use Inner Sanctuary, you get this circle around you, and this circle will apply burn effect that damages enemies. And what's also great about this essence is that whenever you're using Cyclone Strike, you will also apply the WILDFIRE thanks to the Inner Sanctuary. So this is a huge damage increase when you couple these 2 essences. And what's also good about this essence is that it follows with you, so you will have it up 100% of the time. It's very efficient for this build. If we look in the chest slot, I use Driven Thunder, and Driven Thunder makes my Cyclone Strike channel like this. And yeah, this looks like a helicopter, and what's good about this is that when I increase my attack speed, it will also increase my movement speed. Because if I'm just clicking this skill now, you can see that it moves me forward. So if I'm walking normally, or if I'm using this, it doesn't really matter. Whenever I increase my attack speed, I will move faster and faster. So if I can both increase my movement speed and my attack speed, my mobility will be very good. And that's the reason why I use Windchild Shoulder, because what it does is whenever I hit the target with 7-sided strike, it will increase my movement speed by 10%, and this can stack up to 4 times. So this will basically be a 40% movement speed increase. So very, very good. In the pants slot I use terminal pace, and what it says is that Cyclone Strike's damage is increased by 1.9%, up to a maximum of 57% for every 1% increase in movement speed. And this couples very well with the shoulder I just showed you. This means that the buff from the pants will be at maximum value all the time. In the first main hand slot I use Fires of Peace, and what it says is that Shield of Zen doesn't shield you anymore, but periodically deals damage to nearby enemies. And the reason why I use this one is because this version of Shield of Zen will also trigger the Harbinger Paragon. And the Harbinger Paragon gives a very strong damage buff. We can take a look at it real quick. We can see here that I use Blur first, and whenever I use a dash skill, I will become invisible for 5 seconds. And this has a cooldown of 30 seconds. Whenever I exit a Blur, I will gain Ambush that gives me 30% increased damage, and it will also give me 20% increased critical hit chance. But what's also very good is that I can also use this Fate here, so whenever I kill an enemy, any type of monster, it will reset the cooldown of Blur. So I will have basically 100% uptime on these buffs all the time in a dungeon. And if I would use, for example, Califaction, let me show you. And this essence is very good, but the problem with this essence is that it will not trigger the Harbinger effect. So that's why I use the version I am right now. In the first offhand slot I use Eye of the Storm, and it increases the radius of the Cyclone Strike, so it just means that I have a little bit better range when I'm running around killing mobs. In the second main hand slot I use Leaping Shadow, and what it does is that whenever I use a 7-sided strike, it gives me a buff that makes me continually shoot out 7-sided strike attacks. So this will passively just keep attacking monsters and reapply this movement speed buff as well. So it's very efficient to have 40% movement speed all the time. And finally I also have Boundless Breath as the second offhand, and what it does is that Cyclone Strike's cooldown is reduced by 0.07 seconds or 1.6 energy for every yard I move. And that's also great now that I have so much attack speed and movement speed, because this means I will move very fast. Now I'm moving quite slow, but as soon as I apply a buff, I will gain some extra attack speed, move even faster, and when I'm starting to hit enemies with my 7-sided strike combined with Wind Child, I will gain even more movement speed. So you will see when I showcase a dungeon run later on how efficient this combo is. So these are the essences, and it's very, very strong. You will see it soon, but we also have to pair it with some great legendary gems. And the key here is to have as many gems as possible with damage modifiers. And in the first slot I use Entropic Well, because this will give me extra skill attack, which will affect my Cyclone Strike, and the Cyclone Strike is the main source of damage in this build. And what's also good about this gem is that it also increases the skill attack speed by 4%, and that will further increase both my damage and also my movement speed a little bit when I'm using the Cyclone Strike. In the second slot I use Berserker's Eye, because it gives me some extra damage and critical hit chance. In the third slot I use Mother's Lament, because critical hit chance is very, very strong. In the fourth slot I use Morn Skull, and what's so good about Morn Skull, I told you this in another video, is that the maximum damage increase you can get is 36% when you have 3 enemies next to you when it activates. And this has a 20-second cooldown, so it will synchronize with a lot of other gems, which is also very, very good. In this case, in the lower resonance version, I'm not using any 5-star gems, so this will now sync only with Mother's Lament. But when you have a lot of gems syncing at the same time, it's very, very strong. So this gem will have some downtime, but it's worth it, because I rather have 36% increase while other gems are active, compared to 24% increase all the time. In general, Mornskull is a very good gem, and often in dungeons you will also start a fight, Mornskull activates, and then you have finished the fight before it ends. And then there's an animation or something, and whenever the fighting starts again, Mornskull will be ready. So the downtime of Mornskull is often on while you are not fighting. So therefore the downtime is not such a big issue as you might think in the first place. In the 5th slot I'm using Zealot's Weakening. This is a very great budget choice to increase the damage, because you gain 18% extra damage whenever you kill an elite or boss monster, and it also increases your base damage against elites and boss monsters by 4%. So basically this is like a 22% damage increase against all the bosses, which is super good for a cheap price. We also have Pain Clasp. Pain Clasp is great because it gives us 24% increased damage whenever we apply a continuous damage effect. This will also trigger if someone in your team applies it, but this will not be an issue with this build, because since we're using this Inner Flame essence here, we have 100% uptime on Pain Clasp as well. We are also using Tear of the Comet, and what it does is that whenever I'm using channeled skill, it will every second launch 2 missiles. So if you look carefully now, you can see 2 blue missiles shooting out every second. So this is very good with Tear of the Comet, and it also increases the damage done by channeling skills by 6% at rank 10. So also very good. And finally I'm using Fervent Fang, and this will give me 24% increased damage when it's fully charged, because you have to apply 10 stacks, so deal damage 10 times. But it also gives a flat 6% damage increase against all elites and boss monsters, so also very, very strong gem. We can also take a look here at my secondaries. I have already made a video to showcase, not only one video but many videos, what you should focus on when you're building a character. And in many of my videos I get comments from some people that I only deal a lot of damage because of high resonance or high secondaries. But I have to tell you that secondaries have diminishing returns in PvE. So if you have secondaries like me here, I removed a lot of my gems, that will be enough to deal a lot of damage. And if you would add any extra above this level, you will not gain that much from it. So it's I just wanted to show you this. The most important thing to focus on when building your character is to look on your Reforges and on your magical attributes. And if we take a look on our Reforges here, we can see that I use the Vengeance family, and I also have some extra additions here. So I use damage done to enemies suffering loss of control increased, damage done to demons increased, attack speed increased, duration of beneficial effects, and critical hit damage. And this setup is very, very all round for a lot of different builds and classes. So this is probably my favorite. And also this family bonus gives me an extra buff. So whenever I deal damage, I will increase, I have a small chance to increase the damage output by 100%. And it says here that it will only trigger from my primary attacks, but that's not true, because this will also trigger from any type of damage. So when I'm running around with the Cyclone Strike, I will trigger this buff from time to time. I think the cooldown is 9 seconds. So it's also a neat little extra burst damage I get whenever this activates. We can also take a look at all of my magical attributes. We can first look at the offensive items here. Here I have critical hit chance and critical hit damage. These are very good if you combine them. If you have high critical hit damage, it's not really useful if you have very low critical hit chance. So you have to increase your critical hit chance as much as possible first, and then you have your critical hit damage on top of that will make it even stronger. And what's important to remember here is that there is actually a cap on critical hit damage, and this is something I was able to confirm just recently. So once you have 200% critical hit damage, you can't go any further above that. And the base critical hit damage is 100%. So if we go here, for example, and look on my attributes, we can see that I have 57% critical hit damage from all of my gear. And if we go here to my armor penetration, we can see that I will, with my current level, gain 57% critical hit damage. This is actually not true, because it's a little bit lower. It's around 39% with this setup, but I'm in Castle of Serangir now, so it shows a little bit weird here. But this means that I'm actually above the cap. So that's why armor penetration doesn't really matter after some time, because you have already reached the cap, and it's quite easy to do so. But anyways, look for critical hit chance a lot, and then critical hit damage until you cap. And there are also some other great affixes. We can see here that damage done to enemies suffering loss of control is super strong. I have it on most pieces where I can have it, also on my Reforges. Here you can also see I have primary attack damage increase. With this build, this really doesn't do anything, because I will only use my channeling with Cyclone Strike all the time. So this is basically a dead affix for this build. It would be better if I had skill damage here, for example. We can also see here on my other items that I have been able to really almost min-max my entire build. And this is the key to dealing a lot of damage. And if we look on this item, for example, these affixes here are incredible, very, very strong. I couldn't find a better item, probably. I can use the enchantment to increase the damage done to enemies suffering loss of control to 10% here. So there's some room for improvement. And if we scroll down here, we can see that this item dropped for me in Paragon 481. So I've been using this for almost 200 Paragon levels, and it's still my best item. So to perform well in PvE content, of course you need enough combat rating to do specific types of content, but this is not what you should focus on. You should also not look on your normal attributes. They might be a little bit impactful, but it's the magical attributes that matters the most. So I could probably save this item for 200 more Paragon levels when I'm gonna use it in PvE content. Of course, if I go into Gauntlet, where I need maybe more combat rating, or if I go into PvP, maybe I also want a little bit more combat rating. But don't salvage great items that you, just because you have out-leveled them. You should keep them until you find something better. So this is a very, very good advice. And you will see now, when I'm running the dungeon very soon, I'm able to deal tons of damage, out-damaging people that has 3-4 times more resonance than me without a problem. And this is thanks to me building my character correctly. So I really urge you to pay very close attention whenever I upload a guide, so that you don't only look on the essences and the legendary gems. You have to look at the broad picture if you want to perform at the top level. Let's also take a look here at my defensive items. And here the main thing I'm looking for is beneficial effect duration at 6%. So I have it here on my chest, on my pants. I also have 7.5% on my waist. This I can only find if it drops in a dungeon. And if it's a normal attribute item with one magical affix, it can be up to 7.5%. And I also have that here on my feet. And you can see that these items, this one was dropped almost 200 levels ago as well. So don't look on the required level. Of course, if you want to do challenge dungeons, as I mentioned, something where you need more combat rating, then it's great. But for challenge dungeons, Abyssal Verge, open world farming, you just want to have the best items with the best magical attributes on them. We can also look here. I'm always trying to find skill cooldown reduction on my necklace, on my gloves, and on my rings. And here you can see that this looks like a super strong ring here, but in reality I would probably be better if I find anything with skill cooldown reduction. And with this build, movement speed is also great. So now I have showed you what the build looks like, and of course now we're going to dive into a dungeon to see how it performs. And after that I will show you my min-max version where I use some other legendary gems, where I upgrade my resonance a little bit. That will increase the damage a little bit further, but not that much, as you will see now when we are running the dungeons. So I'm gonna explain to you how I'm playing the dungeon and in which order you should use your skills and why. So let's dive straight into Dread Reaver. So here we are in Dread Reaver, and I don't want to use the buffs until the moment that the mobs will spawn, because I want the Harbinger to trigger in the right moment. So I'm gonna save the Sen, Shield of Sen until the monsters spawn, so right now. And you will notice now that this build deals tons of damage. I will be able to deal a lot of crits above 1 million and consistently between 800 and 900k. And there are so many synergies here. We have the burn effect that triggers Pain Clasp 100% of the time, and this burn effect will also help us to trigger WILDFIRE whenever we use Cyclone Strike, so it's superb. We also use 2 pieces of seed just to increase the Cyclone Strike damage even further whenever we are attacking boss monsters. And the mobility is also awesome. If you look very careful now, you can see that whenever I stop using Cyclone Strike, I will slow down. So I have the movement speed from the shoulder when I'm running normally, and that will help me to run even faster as soon as I use Cyclone Strike. And if we compare this to some of the other builds that I've released recently, I showcased a very strong Necromancer build. Probably the Necromancer build deals a little bit more damage once you reach the mobs, but this build has more mobility. So I would say that if you are competing against the Necromancer using my Necromancer build, it will be a fairly even match between the Monk and the Necromancer here. And it's also very fun, because one of the most enjoyable things when running dungeons is if you feel that you are performing well. So when you sit at 2k resonance and you are able to out-damage people that has 3 or 4 times higher resonance than you, that's a very good feeling. And I know that a lot of people, they sometimes send me direct messages on Discord, and they tell me that Oroth, I've been trying out your build, but it doesn't seem to work as well for me. But then when they send me screenshots of their builds, I can see that they have the wrong Reforges. Their magical attributes is just totally random. They have not focused on the details. They have too little beneficial effect duration, too little skill cooldown reduction, and also the offensive attributes are just there randomly. And I really want you to watch my entire guides when I'm releasing them, because it contains so much useful information. And if you want to perform at the top level, it's not enough to just copy the essences and the set pieces and maybe some of the legendary gems. You have to focus on everything. So with that being said, you can see now we perform superbly well with this build. Survivability is not an issue either, because you will kill all the monsters before they're able to hit you. And now we're gonna look at the higher resonance version, where I use some 5-star gems as well. But you will see that the output will not differ that much. So yeah, of course, if you want to perform at the very top, then you might need some higher rank 5-star gems. It will make a small difference, but not that much. So I hope that you like this build now, and please stay tuned for the final segment of this video. So basically the setup is exactly the same. The only difference is that I now use some type of different legendary gems. So let's take a look. I still use Entropic Well, but now I use Bottled Hope and Blood-Soaked Jade just to give me some extra damage and increased resonance. And I also use Rolling Consequence instead of Mother's Lament, just because it gives some extra dot effects, it gives a little bit more critical hit chance, and also it increases the resonance. But all in all, if you look here, the build is quite similar. I switched out just a few gems. And What I can also mention before we watch another dungeon run is that if we go here to the warband, I can switch between either the attack room that gives me more damage, or if I want to, I can also use the protector room to increase my size. And if I use the protector room, I will move even faster. And this depends a little bit on the team I'm running dungeons with. In general, I feel like it's more reasonable to go for damage if you do randoms, but if you are in a very strong group, then you can go for extra size instead, just to increase your mobility a little bit further. But this is 100% optional, so you can try both of them out and see what works best for you. And yeah, I can also mention that I have more secondaries utilizing this version, but as I mentioned earlier, the extra secondaries here will not do anything for me really, because my critical hit damage is already capped, so extra armor penetration doesn't matter, and the potency is not very important for this build. So yeah, all in all, the secondaries is great up to a certain point, as I mentioned, but after that it doesn't really matter anymore. So even as a free-to-play player, even if you've been playing for quite some time, your secondaries will be high enough to optimize for PvE content. So yes, let's now dive into the final dungeon of this video. Something very funny happened. Just as I hit the record button, one of my friends asked me if I have any new builds for Monk coming up. So yeah, that was a coincidence. So I thought, like, let's bring my friend with me on some dungeon runs, because then we will have a possibility to compare our outputs. So here we are in Cavern of Echoes, and he got a little bit of a head start running ahead of me, but I will probably be able to catch up. And in the end of this dungeon run, we can compare our damage output, and then I will take a look at his setup and see why I deal more damage than him probably. And he is now using the same essences as I do and the same skills. You will notice now with the higher resonance version, in some cases I will deal a bit more crits, higher crits compared to the low resonance version, but the difference is not huge. So I would say that the output, if I would run against myself with the low resonance version, would maybe be like 25% higher damage output. It can be a little bit difficult to compare, but yeah, somewhere around there. So yeah, the gameplay is exactly the same as with the low resonance version, and now we're gonna nuke down this boss together probably, and then we're gonna take a look at his build and compare it with my build. So let's wait for the boss to spawn here, and then we're gonna go all in. And now I'm at 590 million, and this boss has 103 million HP. So remember, now I was at 590, I end up at 657, so I deal 60% of the damage to the boss here. And let's see where he ends up, and remember, he got a little bit of a head start. Okay, at 301 million, so I deal more than twice as much as him. So let's take a look at his build now. We can see that he uses the same essences as me, but if we look here on the magical attributes, they are not as optimized as mine are. This is a huge damage drop for him. We can also see here that a lot of his items doesn't have skill cooldown reduction or beneficial effect duration. So he has a lot of room for improvement here. We can see here though that he has very good reforges, so overall his build and setup is still nice, but he would have to switch out some legendary gems, and also he should focus on optimizing his magical attributes even further. We can also look at his legendary gems, and we can see that he has some great gems equipped, but there are some of these that don't really do anything with this build. First of all, Maw of the Deep is not a good gem for PvE content. We can also see Gloomcask here, which does nothing in this build because we're not using the primary attack. Seeping Bile is also almost a dead gem here because I don't like to use dot gems in most types of DPS builds or dungeon builds, except if we can resolve the damage at once, like we can do with Crusader or Necromancers, for example. We also see the Starfire Shard. It's almost a dead gem as well in this setup. And finally we have the Void Spark, which is a decent gem for this build because it will increase the attack speed a little bit, but I would replace that one as well. So if we compare this with my gem setup, he has almost no damage modifiers. He has the Blood-Soaked Jade and the Bottled Hope, but he should probably switch in Morn Skull, and he should switch in Fervent Fang, and maybe switch in Pain Clasp. There are many different options here that he can use. So if you look at my version, for example, I also use some 1-star gems just because they fit into the build. So don't look on the resonance at all. Try to diversify your gem pool. Now, since we can make gems dormant, we have a possibility to have several gems in our arsenal, and we can move the gem fragments around, and the difference will be huge when you do different types of content compared to just having a few set of legendary gems that you are focusing on 100%. So that's also a key takeaway from this video. Against a lot of people around my same resonance, I will deal 3 times as much damage, so he still performed well. But this is probably also the case for you, no matter your resonance, that if you can optimize compared to having a random setup, you can multiply your previous damage times 3 or 4 when you have optimized. So that's how big the difference will be. So with that being said, I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that it maybe served as an eye-opener for some of you. And until next time, I want to wish you a very nice day or a very nice evening wherever you are. And to all of my clan members in Nyx, I would of course also like to say Voruk Nyx, Sholak Sol. So, bye bye!
If a boy or if a girl,
Subscribe to Oros channel.
let him take you to his world.
Subscribe to Oros channel.
The best choice you will ever make.
Subscribe to Oros channel.
Hit the bell, a piece of cake.
Subscribe to Oros channel.
Let me tell you one more time.
Subscribe to Oros channel.
All the answers you will find.
Subscribe to Oros channel.